Okay, so you've got an exam coming up, and one of the biggest questions is always this. Why is it so hard for countries to cooperate, even when it's obviously in everyone's best interest? Well, that's what we're going to break down right now. We'll look at the core theories you need to know, and more importantly, how the system tries to solve this puzzle. Let's get right into it.
All right, here's what we're covering. First, we'll nail down the key definitions. Then we'll get into the big one, the prisoner's dilemma, why cooperation is so tough. After that, we'll look at how institutions can fix this, and we'll wrap up with a really cool modern case study on climate clubs.
Okay, first things first. There's a really common trap people fall into on exams, and that's confusing institutions with organizations. They sound similar, but in international relations, they are totally different things. Getting this right is absolutely crucial, so let's lock it down.
So here's the best way to think about it, and you'll never forget it. Institutions are the rules of the game. Think of them like the rule book for soccer. Organizations, on the other hand, are the players on the field. They're the actual teams, like the UN or the World Trade Organization. You know, the ones with logos, staff, and actual buildings.
Let's take a super clear example. Diplomatic immunity, right? There's no big headquarters for it, no logo, it's not an organization. It's a rule. It's a powerful principle that everyone agrees on, and it guides how countries behave. That's what an institution is. It's one of the rules of the game.
All right, so we've got our players and we've got the rules. So how do they actually interact with each other on the world stage? Well, it pretty much all comes down to two things you got to know: bargaining and cooperation.
Think of it like this. Bargaining is what we call a zero-sum game. Imagine we have a pizza. If I take an extra slice, that means there's one less slice for you. My win is your loss. Simple. But cooperation, that's a positive-sum game. Instead of just fighting over the existing pizza, we work together to order a much bigger one. That way we can both have more slices than we would have before.
And what's really interesting is that you often find bargaining inside of cooperation. Take climate change. Everyone agrees, yeah, we should cooperate to lower emissions. But then the bargaining starts. Okay, so who's going to pay for it? Developed countries might push for one set of rules, and developing nations for another. They're all fighting to get the best deal for themselves, trying to get the smallest slice of the bill.
Okay, this leads us to the absolute heart of the matter. It's a huge puzzle you have to understand for your exam. If cooperation is so great, if we can all get a bigger slice of the pie, why is it so ridiculously hard to achieve? Why does it break down all the time?
Well, the answer, or at least the best model we have for the answer, comes from game theory. It's a famous idea that shows this constant battle between what's good for me versus what's good for us.
And it's called the prisoner's dilemma. Get this. It shows exactly how two perfectly logical, rational actors, each making the smartest choice for themselves, can end up in a situation that's way worse for both of them. It sounds crazy, but it happens all the time.
Okay, let's walk through this matrix, because this is the key. Put yourself in Jim's shoes. You don't know what Bob is going to do. So you think, all right, what if Bob confesses? Well, if he confesses, my best move is to confess too, because 8 years is better than 10. Okay, but what if Bob stays quiet? Well, then my best move is still to confess, because then I get 0 years instead of 1. So you see, no matter what Bob does, it's always in my own self-interest to confess. And Bob is thinking the exact same thing. So what happens? They both confess, and they both get 8 years in jail, which is so much worse than the 1 year they would have gotten if they could have just trusted each other and stayed quiet.
This terrible result, this confess box, has a name. It's called a Nash equilibrium, and it's basically a trap. Once you're in it, neither player can do better by changing their strategy alone. Think about it. If Jim and Bob are both confessing, and Jim suddenly decides to stay quiet, he gets 10 years instead of 8, so he's stuck. It's a stable outcome, but it's a really bad one.
Now that much better outcome where they both stay quiet and only get 1 year, that's called the Pareto optimal outcome. It's the best possible result for the group. But, and this is the whole point of the dilemma, it's not stable. Why? Because the temptation to betray the other person to get 0 years is just too powerful. There's no trust.
So how does this relate to countries? Well, this is exactly the problem of free riding. You know, when a country wants the benefit of something, like a stable climate, but they don't want to pay the cost of cutting their own emissions, they're hoping everyone else will cooperate so they can just enjoy the ride for free. The prisoner's dilemma explains perfectly why that's such a tempting strategy.
So this all seems pretty bleak, right? If everyone just acts in their own self-interest, we end up in a worse place. So how do we ever solve big problems? Well, this is where we circle back to our first key concept. The answer is international institutions.
What institutions do is they basically change the rules of the game to help us escape the prisoner's dilemma. They set standards so everyone knows what's expected, they monitor behavior so it's harder to get away with cheating, they provide a place to settle disputes, and they let us pool our resources. All of this builds trust and lowers the fear that you're going to get betrayed. It makes cooperation the smart, rational choice, not just the nice one.
Okay, let's look at a really sharp, modern example of how you can design an institution to solve this exact problem. It's an idea called climate clubs.
This idea is designed for one reason and one reason only: to defeat the free riding problem in climate change. It's a direct shot at fixing the prisoner's dilemma that has made global climate agreements so difficult for so long.
So how does it work? It's actually pretty clever. Step 1, a group of countries gets together and agrees to serious climate policies. They form a club. But here's the game changer. Step 2, they place a penalty, like a carbon tariff, on goods from any country outside the club. And that's the magic. Suddenly, free riding isn't free anymore. The economic pain of being left out becomes greater than the cost of joining in and cooperating. It completely flips the incentives of the prisoner's dilemma.
Now, obviously, we're moving fast here to give you the core concepts. For the full summary of this lesson, and most importantly, to test yourself with some practice exams, make sure you head over to gradeguru.nl. All right, let's do a super quick recap of what you absolutely need to remember for the exam. 1. Institutions are rules, organizations are players. Don't mix them up. 2. The prisoner's dilemma shows why rational actors often fail to cooperate. 3. Institutions are the solution. They build trust by setting standards and monitoring. And 4. Climate clubs are a perfect, modern example of an institution designed to punish free riding and make cooperation the winning strategy.
And that leaves us with a big question to think about, looking forward. As the world changes and power shifts between countries, are the institutions we have now, the current rules of the game, going to be enough? Or are we going to have to create entirely new ones to deal with the challenges of the future?